The Daily Wire has made some huge announcements during its Backstage Live. The Supreme Court has ruled on the EPA as well as the Remain in Mexico policy, and the left are once again shouting racism on today's episode of The Bald Brad Show. Welcome to The Bald Brad Show. Folks, it's Friday. You made it. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You might have had some hardships during the week. You might even had some accomplishments, God willing. But heck, you deserve a pat on the back, folks. It's a victory in my books for making it this far. Heading into the weekend, we deserve to hear some great news here on The Bald Brad Show. So our lead story of the day, it's just that. It's victorious news. It's winning, according to Charlie Sheen. You had the Daily Wire the other day on Backstage Live announcing a lot of news, a lot of expansion for their platform. First of which, they have 890,000 paid subscribers. That is a big deal. It's obviously nowhere near Netflix's 200 million or Disney Plus's 200 million. You have all these other platforms of streaming services. But 890,000 is a great start. 7 years ago, when this company started, I was there at the very beginning. I saw Ben Shapiro's first episode. I was watching it. And things were so small back then that he used to answer your questions through a mailbag, and there'd only be like a handful. And there were so little people watching that I would get my questions answered almost on a weekly basis. That's unheard of now. You'd be lucky to even get your question read by the Daily Wire nowadays. Before his videos would be, 10, 15 minutes in length. They were not the hour-long episodes. There wasn't all these crazy sponsors and all this stuff. It was in Jeremy Boring's pool house with these black tarps, and it wasn't even a black tarp on day one, really. That was more for Andrew Klavan's show. Ben Shapiro just had like a wood planking with like a TV in the back. It's hilarious. Still looks better than what we got here in the Bald Brad Show, that's for sure. A lot more people involved. But this is a big deal for me because I've seen this company grow from the ground up. I saw their vision from day one, which is why I wanted to subscribe since day one. All these things is just good news for conservatives and Republicans. On top of that, not just the paid subscriber announcement, but they're starting Daily Wire Plus, and this is to combat against Disney. Disney's pushing of this trans ideology, LGBTQ plus, alphabet soup community stuff upon your kids, where they want to put out content that's not going to sit there and trans your kid. It's not going to sit there and indoctrinate your kid. And if it is, it's going to be on American values. It's going to be on values that abide by our creed, our Constitution, the things that Americans used to believe in. They're going to put out stuff like kids content, so your kids actually have a place to go where you can trust in the institution that's providing this content not to indoctrinate your kids with CRT, racism, gay stuff, and all sorts of shenanigans. Like, content needs to be for your kids, engaging, fun, keeps them out of your hair, but a place that you can go and trust. So they're still going to do the news. They're still going to do the children's programming now, which they announced actually a few months back. But on top of that, they're going to produce more movies. They're going to have TV shows, reality TV. Furthermore, the big news of the night, I'd say maybe even the biggest news, is they've signed Jordan B. Peterson, Dr. Peterson, to their platform, which is huge. You have the intellect of this person. You have the doctorate degree of this person, the books behind this person, the educational aspect behind this person, and the reach of this person as well. They might hit 1 million paid subscribers with this announcement of Jordan Peterson joining the platform. I know there was a lot of people holding back because during Ben Shapiro's announcement, before he was going to do an episode with Jordan Peterson, a lot of people in the chat were saying, wow, if they get Jordan Peterson, I'm going to subscribe. And that was months ago because they did an episode with him. So now they got him. I can't imagine them not getting either 1 million paid subscribers or even 1 million. But this is big news because now conservatives are really making an impact, or at least starting to make an impact on the culture. And this is the vision that I've saw and heard from them since day one. Obviously, I've been a proud supporter of what they're doing, of going against the leftist progressive media, calling out their hypocrisy, exposing them, doing all those things, and that will continue. But I also want them to develop conservative media, conservative movies and TV shows, because that is what we need. There is a hunger for that, and Disney the progressive left outlets, these companies, these corporations don't see it. They don't see that there's a demand for it, which is mind-boggling because you just had Top Gun 2 making over $1 billion in 2022, beating out Marvel and DC. There was no wokeism. There was no all this leftist LGBTQ plus trans identity stuff taking place in the film. It was pure Americana. And you still had all that stuff in there of a diversity cast. It just wasn't thrown in your face. When you go in the military, you expect to see black people, Hispanic people, Mexican people, white people, all sorts of ethnicities going into the United States military. It's not shoved in your face, nor should it be. And you had a woman in the cast. You had black people in the cast, white people in the cast. You had all sorts of ethnicities. At no point did they ever acknowledge that. At no point did they ever go, oh, wow, look at that woman flying a jet. Oh my gosh, a black guy flying an F-22? What the hell? No way. Wow, the first black guy to ever fly. All this stuff, it was never thrown in your face. It was just there, and we accepted it, and we understood it, that was normal. But the progressive left, whether it's through their Disney Plus movies or their Marvel movies that they're throwing in theaters, like Doctor Strange, Darkness of the Universe, or something of that nature. I can't even remember the name of it that he had. But it was in the multiverse, Darkness of the Multiverse or something. Multiverse of Madness, that's what it was. Pushing the gay stuff right in front of us. You know, they have this new cast, this new co-star of Doctor Strange, and her parents are gay. You know, it's just the stuff's being thrown out consistently in front of our faces by Disney Plus, and they're open about it. Disney execs have come out and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We have a new agenda. We want 50% of our content by a certain point in time to either have a trans lead, basically an LGBTQ plus elemental P alphabet soup community lead or something like that. They want 50%. So they want a quota on all this stuff. Top Gun didn't do any of that. Just pure American, whooping ass, great story, had the nostalgia, didn't deviate from nostalgia, did everything right, and they got over $1 billion. All the while, Doctor Strange 2 couldn't do it. Batman couldn't do it with his dark stuff. And mind you, I actually liked the new Batman movie, believe it or not, with Robert Pattinson. I like the story of it, very detective, not really so much Batman within itself. But again, the whole point is there's a conversation that needs to be had that there is a hunger and a starvation for this type of content, that people want to see pro-American films, not this woke LGBTQ stuff, not this gay stuff throwing in our face. And mind you, you can still have that stuff in the film, right? You can still have the gay stuff there. You just don't need to address it. It's there. If you're throwing it in front of our faces, which can be done on a cinematic basis, which can be done through story, people are going to be able to pick up on it. You could have had somebody gay in the film for all we know in Top Gun, and you would have never known because it's not thrown in your face. It might have even been part of the story. It wasn't, but it might have been part of the story. And you didn't have to make it a whole point on phrasing in a way of going, wow, okay, I get your point. People don't even talk like that. Case in point, what they did on Winter Soldier with that new black actor becoming the new Captain America, had this whole scene in the street talking with police officers about racism and all this stuff. And I remember sitting there going, what the heck? People don't even talk like that on a regular basis. It was scripted in a way that was staged. We're trying to make a clear point. We couldn't have been more clear other than breaking the fourth wall like I'm doing with you of talking to the camera. That's the only way they could have at least made it any more thrown into your face of them talking, saying, America is racist. I couldn't have been Captain America because I'm black and there's a bunch of racist white people. There's institutions and systems that held me back. And, you know, you cops right now are all racist too. Look at you. You got a black man in a neighborhood. All this stuff. We don't need to hear that. We just want to see a black Captain America. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Be what you're going to be, but you don't have to throw it in our faces consistently. So again, huge news from the Daily Wire. And again, this impacts me a lot because I'm a subscriber. If they want to up their rates, take my money. Proudly take my money. That's okay. Even if it's going in their pockets, as long as they're pushing an agenda that is pro-American, pro-conservative, and pushing content out there that is not going to be throwing certain things in my face consistently, I'm all for it. All for it. Take my money. I'll get a second job. I don't care. Granted, I have a second job, but you get what I'm saying. I think it's vital and important. Now, in other news, this one's actually still winning in good news. The Supreme Court rules against EPA, limits agencies' authorities to regulate carbon dioxide emissions, and obviously the Greta Thunbergs, the Biden administration, the Democrats, the progressive left, because they're all combined in one kind of loop-de-loop unison. They're losing their minds over this. They're taking to the streets again, just acting insane, which we'll get to our last story of the day of just how insane they're going, because whenever they get insane, they always go to a very specific something, and I'll tell you kind of before, and they get to the whole racism aspect of everything. That's where we're going to end up leading here in a moment. But before that, let's get into this Environmental Protection Agency, EPA versus West Virginia. So the Supreme Court ruled in West Virginia v. EPA that the EPA does not have the constitutional authority to regulate carbon dioxide emissions from power plants in order to bring about a transition away from coal energy throughout the country, because it was not specifically granted by the power of Congress. And this is important because lately you've had the Supreme Court within this last week, I would say maybe week and a half, actually going towards what the Constitution says and doesn't say. And sometimes that is going to lead to certain losses on the conservative side, which will be our next story regarding the Remain in Mexico policy. But it says here, quote, the Supreme Court sharply curtails the authority of the EPA to regulate greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. In a 6-3 ruling, the court sides with conservative states and fossil fuel companies, in adopting a narrow reading of the Clean Air Act. Greta Thunberg's probably screaming, "Don't you dare! I can't believe you, screw you!" Just losing their minds over it. As noted by SCOTUS blog, the central question was whether or not Congress granted the EPA of the Clean Air Act the authority to devise emission caps based on the generation shifting approach that the agency took in the Clean Power Plan. Basically saying, hey, you know what, we're going to pass our regulative authority onto you, and you go and decide and basically create, I don't want to say create law, but basically create regulations and certain things that people would have to abide by when the EPA is not an elective representative body. So basically they're deviating and putting the power towards and giving it to somebody else. Very similar to kind of what we were seeing with the executive branch, Congress, handing over power to the CDC during COVID-19. And everybody's going, where the hell? You're not representative of the body. You weren't elected. Why the hell are you telling us what to do? And that's where the problem came into effect here. But again, because the progressive left, the Democrats lack understanding of how government is supposed to work, they just want power, which is always mind-blowing to me that they'll say, oh, well, the Republicans want power. It's all about power. Again, it will get that aspect of power into our last news story of the day regarding racism and holding people back, blah, 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 blah. It's all Republicans' fault. It's all conservatives' fault. Look at them want power. It's mind-blowing because conservatives and Republicans don't want bigger government. We don't want the government to have a lot of power. We want the power to be within the individual, within the people, within Americans, to be able to elect and vote in who they want, that will sit there and adopt their rights, their decisions, and what they want going forward. But again, the Democrats don't want that. They want the federal government to decide everything. But then when the government itself, the big government, meaning, you know, you have the judicial branch here voting on something that goes their way, all of a sudden the government sucks. All of a sudden it's terrible. It's just, they are so wish-washy on everything. It is mind-blowing. And I'll get to the point, again, when we get into our next Supreme Court hearing of the Remain in Mexico policy. SCOTUS blog explained that the dispute began in 2015 with the Obama administration's adoption of the Clean Power Plan, a rule that sought to combat climate change by reducing carbon pollution from power plants. The plan never went into effect. However, several states and private plaintiffs challenged it in federal court, and divided Supreme Court put it on hold in February 2016. Once Donald Trump came into the office, his administration repealed the plan and instituted basically a set of rules known as the ACE rule. And it went down through the circuit courts, blah, blah, blah. And Chief Justice ended up writing the majority opinion and was joined by Justice Clarence Thomas, who's now an Uncle Tom to the Democrats and progressive left. He's no longer black, folks. Somehow he's white. Amy Coney Barrett, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch. Justices Alina Kagan, Breyer, and Sotomayor dissented, obviously. Again, those three are always in band. They're always in unison. The fact that they would never deviate is just, it's typical. This is what the majority decision opinion stated. It said, capping carbon dioxide emissions at a level that will force a nationwide transition away from the use of coal to generate electricity may be a sensible solution to the crisis of the day, Roberts concluded. But it is not plausible that the Congress gave EPA the authority to adopt on its own such a regulatory scheme in Section 111D. a decision of such magnitude and consequence rests with Congress itself, or an agency acting pursuant to a clear delegation from the representative body, which is what I just said earlier. The judgment of the Court Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuits is reversed, and the cases are remained for further proceedings consistent with this opinion. So again, they're delegating and giving certain duties to a sector of the government, the EPA, that's not elected by the people, and that's where this is a problem. And again, the left just don't understand it. They don't get it. So that was one victory for all of us, because a lot of conservatives and Republicans just don't like the EPA. I mean, hell, I'd say even people that are centrist aren't a big fan of the EPA. So that was a win, but now we got kind of a loss here, folks. And this has to do with immigration, illegal immigration, and also kind of, MAGA people, Trump people, kind of like myself. So Supreme Court hands Biden a victory here, allows to end Remain in Mexico policy. So this one is kind of hard to get and understand. And it is kind of a wonky decision, not in the sense of I necessarily disagree with it. It's just, you could tell the justices were trying to interpret and understand the wording and language of what was written in the law and the acts within itself. So I get where they're coming from here, and it's kind of the fault of those that created the Remain in Mexico policy within itself and the laws that are on the books, because it's just not really clear. So the Supreme Court ruled Thursday in a 5-4 decision that the Biden administration can repeal the Trump administration's migrant protection protocols, commonly known as Remain in Mexico policy, reversing a lower court ruling. Under that policy, migrants seeking entry into the United States basically had to stay in Mexico as they awaited their hearings. The Trump administration, as you know, put in the policy in place so that migrants would not be released into the United States, of which the Biden administration is trying to reverse that because that's what he wants to do. He just wants to release thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions at this point. We've heard upwards of 1.5 million people being released into the interior of the United States. That's what he wants. So at issuance of whether the Department of Homeland Security's suspension and subsequent termination of the policy violated federal law was what the Biden administration was looking at, as well as the Supreme Court. That basically requires migrants to be detained, or if they arrive from a contiguous country, basically being sent back. Well, they didn't go with that. You had Roberts citing this, saying that someone applying for admission shall be detained for a proceeding unless they are clearly and beyond a doubt entitled to be admitted. And also says if they are from a contiguous territory like Mexico, the Attorney General may return the alien to that territory as they are awaiting a hearing. You have Texas and Missouri had pointed to this language and arguing that the Remain in Mexico policy was necessary to adhere to this law. Without the ability to detain everyone, the states argued in their lawsuit sending them back would be possible and necessary. So you have this fighting on language. And the court's majority pointed to the language in the law saying that the government, quote, may return migrants to a contiguous territory, noting the, quote, discretionary nature of the wording. Well, all sides agreed that the state's interpretation agreed basically with the states that the lower court ruling that a return is required if a person is not detained that the court disputed. The problem is that the statute does not say anything like that, Roberts wrote. So because the statute and the wording of it doesn't fit kind of what the lower courts were applying, doesn't necessarily fit what Texas and Missouri was saying, then they're going to basically throw it out. And so you have Justice Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, and Brett Kavanaugh going along with this. Now, here's my issue, not necessarily with the wording and kind of the way Congress went about it. I understand it. If you got a problem with the wording, get it. You can get that fixed later on and figure everything out, blah, blah. But the problem is that you see the lack in linear logic with Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan. And I guess technically Kavanaugh here too. Again, the quote was, the problem is the statute does not say anything like that. This goes back to the Roe v. Wade decision, on which Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan did not want it to be overturned. If you recall in our episode where we did the history of Roe v. Wade, we started off with Griswold v. Connecticut, and we talked about how through the emanations of the Bill of Rights, it created penumbras, shadows, that within those shadows, you can find newly found rights, but according to the justices of the time, those rights have already existed, unbeknownst to 176 years of legislatures and framers who never wrote it into the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Somehow it was still there, and that you could find these newly found rights. So even though it didn't say anything like it in terms of a woman's right to abortion within itself, they applied the zone of privacy or the right to privacy to Roe v. Wade, and that you had a right to ultimately have an abortion. So they found all these newly found rights, right? Doesn't say anything like it. The justices actually acknowledged it of the time, not just in Griswold v. Connecticut, but also Roe v. Wade. The clerks of those that wrote the majority opinion, Black Mum, of Roe v. Wade, said that it was bad law, that it actually doesn't say anything like it in there. That you have the same people that didn't want it to be overturned because somehow it says it in there, even though it doesn't. But then here want to get rid of the Remain in Mexico because the statute does not say anything like it. So on one hand, it doesn't say it, but we're going to still go for it. Here it doesn't say it, so we're going to go against it and remove it. Does anybody not see kind of the switch in the maneuvers here and the lack of linear logic that are coming with these justices? I get the language. I understand that. If something doesn't say it, hell, it doesn't say it. That's the problem of those that wrote the damn thing. But, again, this is the stuff they want to push here. This is how it all works, and that's what bugs me. And that's why I like justices like Clarence Thomas that sit there and can go and have linear logic, that have a problem with certain people's thinking. I understand they all get along, but hell, you gotta think, man. He has to be banging his head against the wall with Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, and now maybe even Kavanaugh. But again, I understand the idea. I know I'm repeating myself, but I get the understanding of the idea that's not there. Now, here's my problem with it all. You're not sending them back. The Biden administration wants them here. There's not enough room for them here, which is why he was basically flying them and planing them all around the United States under the dark of the night. We have footage of that in old episodes. Go check those out. Of security basically going, what the hell is this plane doing here on the tarmac? There's no record of this plane. Who are you? The guy's being suspicious. Literally, it's dark. There's no lights around. The guy says, we don't want news and media around. We don't want cameras around. We got footage of these guys placing these illegal immigrants into vans, into buildings, and then chauffeuring them off to other places in the United States. There's been graphs that a lot of these people, majority of them are heading to Florida, which is pissing off Governor Ron DeSantis. But also the other problem here with this Remain in Mexico policy that the basically the liberals had was that the people that were being held in Mexico while trying to wait for their paperwork to be evaluated is there was rapes and all this stuff happening. Basically, all this crime was happening in those camps and the tents along the border that was on the Mexico side. Somehow, and it's going to sound terrible, somehow that's our fault. Somehow somebody else's country is committing all these crimes, but it's our fault. And I'd like to point out that a lot of these people seeking asylum, and it's terrible. I'm not for rape. I'm not for any of that crime, but that's Mexico's problem. Where's the Mexican government on that? Where is the left here? All these feminists and all these people in the LGBT community not rising up and getting pissed at the Mexican government. Why are you getting pissed at our government for sending somebody back while they're trying to meet their asylum or get their paperwork evaluated and all these things? We don't have room for them here. You want to let them into the interior and understand that a lot of them do go to their court dates and all those things, but the vast majority of them do not meet the requirements of asylum and all those things. So where's the leftist progressive getting all pissed off about those that are getting raped and savaged in Mexico? But when they're here, it's fine. It's whatever. It's just, you ask these questions and then what you're going to be called is a racist. You ask any sort of question, you're a bigot. You're a homophobe, all these things. And you're just asking questions. I'm not saying that we shouldn't sit there and try to figure it out of like, okay, well, what can we do about the immigration paperwork? How can we streamline it? How can we make it better? I think that's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. I think a lot of people that try to come into this country the legal way says it sucks and needs to be fixed. But to say that it's always our fault, it's our problem that other people are getting raped and that, well, we should just let them stay here, that we're just going to allow them. This is clearly an incentive for them to pour across the country, make such a demand that we don't have enough room to keep them. So we have to send them other places like arenas around the United States, pay for their hotel fees, pay for their medical. Some of them give birth here. We got to pay for that. We got to pay for their food. We got to pay for their shelter. We got to pay for their clothing. We got to pay for their baby formula. We got to pay for all these things. And nobody's raising eyebrows going, hey, this is probably a problem. You got MS-13 gang members pouring across the border. You got drug cartel pouring across the border. This incentivizes more smuggling and sex trafficking of the border. You have all these things taking place, but the Democrats left don't want to talk about it. Remain in Mexico, effectively gone. So that's what the Supreme Court ruled on. It is a loss for us, but hey, you know what? It's also the problem with those that created it. For lack of language, you should have made it more clear. And again, it says right here, Roberts explained that Congress meant for a return to be mandatory in the event that there was a lack of compliance with the detention requirement. It would have said so in clear language. So because it didn't, we ended up getting screwed on that one. So again, if you push back in any way, shape, or form, you're racist. And this brings me to my next point here. When the left doesn't have anything going their way, when they're losing the culture war, how are they going to take it back? By calling everybody racist. And not just everybody, all institutions, all systems are all racist. So you have Pete Buttigieg coming out, and he's doing an initiative to address racial inequalities in highway systems. He's literally saying roads, railroads, bridges, they're all racist. I'm not kidding. This isn't the first time we've heard something like this. The 1619 Project, Nicole Hannah-Jones wrote a whole book on this stuff, saying that the roads and freeways and highways are all racist. So this isn't new. This is probably where he's getting this from too. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has launched an initiative that seeks to redress inequalities created by civil engineering in previous generations. You're going to love the wording that the AP put out on this with Buttigieg, because he basically says it's nobody's fault. We shouldn't put guilt on anyone, but yet they're putting guilt on people. So according to the AP, Buttigieg Reconnecting Communities project aims to reunify historically black neighborhoods divided decades ago when the interstate highway systems was developed and restored the civic pride that comes with safe and beautiful green spaces. What an adoption of language on that. Again, we consistently see the left and the Democrats talk in ways that nobody else talks. To restore the civic pride that comes with safe and beautiful green spaces. A lot of white neighborhoods that don't have beautiful green spaces. Hell, if you're talking about California, we got a water crisis here. The freeways are just brown. I mean, it's trash. There's homeless people on the side of the freeways and highways and roads. So I love how he's going to talk about safe and beautiful green spaces. Just go to any leftist Democrat-ran area that's been ran basically for decades. Some of them have always been Democrat-ran, and he's going to call racism on it. So your own party is racist, I guess. Transportation can connect us to jobs, services, and loved ones, but we've always seen countless cases around the country where a piece of infrastructure cuts off a neighborhood or a community because of how it was built. This is a forward-looking vision, he continued, for our focus isn't about assigning blame. It's about getting caught up in guilt. And it's not about that. Rather, it's not about getting caught up in guilt, he says. It's about fixing a problem. It's about mending what has been broken, especially when the damage has done with taxpayer dollars. I love that he's not about blaming the guilt. Literally, 1619 Project is about blaming guilt. That's all the left do is shout guilt. Upon who? You think it's upon Democrats, who is the party of racism, who is the party of slavery, who is the party of the Ku Klux Klan? You think they're going to put the blame on that and how it shifted more of a metaphorical plantation of holding down blacks today? Which I don't think blacks are held down. I think in some way, shape, or form, they are in different aspects on an individual basis. But as far as a society and a social fabric goes, it only takes one generation to get out of poverty. You're going to have people have to do some serious sacrificing, multiple people in a household working at the same time, pooling their money together, putting it into a 401k, investing it in certain places as well as paying their bills. That might be your husband working 2 jobs, you're working 2 jobs, your kid in high school at the age of 16 is working a few hours a week to help pay for their meal and their lunches. They turn 18, they're working through college, paying for their own college. They finally get a job. They start investing in their 401k, matching, all those things. It will take one generation, but you will be out of poverty. That's the things, that's the mindset people need to have. But no, they're going to write books like this. They're going to go out there and say everything's racist. Roads are racist now. Freeways are racist. Railways are racist. Milk cartons are racist. If you think I'm joking on that one, that really happened. They said milk was racist because it's white. If you recall years ago, and I learned this in business school, I think it was business law actually, there was a whole case on the fact and idea that Band-Aids were racist because they weren't offered in different colors. And I raised my hand to the professor. I said, well, on a business basis, this is a business law class, on a business level, if majority of the people in America are white, wouldn't it make more sense to create one color because it's appeasing to the masses of those that would predominantly be buying Band-Aids? Would you go out and buy and mess with your margins and your numbers, buying a different ink, having to create a different sector and possibly lower the limit of creating of Band-Aids or the quantity of Band-Aids in one color so you could supply a different color to a lower amount of people per capita, depending on where you're producing it, or 13% of the population that might not even be statistically using Band-Aids in the same capacity at the same rates as other people were? I mean, again, I'm not just talking about white people, like myself. I mean, Asian people have basically the same skin color as well. So you're meeting the vast majority of the population, but somehow all those companies were racist because they didn't make a different color Band-Aid. And again, if you just look at the business aspect of it, it wouldn't have made sense. Obviously, there's different color Band-Aids now. I mean, if they only made black Band-Aids, I would still wear it. I don't care. I don't think it's racist just to have black Band-Aids. It's a Band-Aid. There's white Band-Aids. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's silly. He said, this is forward-looking vision, he continued. Our focus isn't about assigning blame. Again, it's not about getting caught up in the guilt, but yet we're going to push that narrative out there in the first place and just, disregard that whole sentence that he basically just said. The pilot program allows municipalities up to 5 years to apply for funding for mass transit lines, green spaces built on top of roadways, known as freeway lids or caps, repurposing defunct rail lines, and perhaps even rerouting or partially removing highways. Targeted areas in New Orleans, Houston, Tampa, perhaps Nashville. Folks, this is going to be expensive. We did a bullet train thing in California here, which conservative Republicans were strongly opposed to, never got built. Billions of dollars spent. They wanted to build a bullet train basically from, I think, like Southern California to either Northern or Las Vegas or something like that. I can't even remember anymore. So long ago. And just threw out money. Totally corrupt. Nobody investigated it. And it just never got built. Just throwing money down the drain. I mean, it takes years for Caltrans in California just to upgrade our freeways. I mean, our freeways are so congested. I think we have the most traffic in the entire United States here in Southern California. I mean, you go 30 miles, it could take you 2 or 3 hours. And I'm not exaggerating. I used to work 32 miles, to be specific, from my home. And some days it would take me 3.5 hours to get home. And about 2 hours to get to work every day. So I'm sitting 5 hours of the day in the car. I mean, it's wild. It's wild. But, hey, it's Democrat ran. Senate's Democrat. Localities are Democrat. Governor's Democrat. But they got everything figured out, folks. So Ron DeSantis of Florida jumps into the mix, as he would. I heard some weird stuff from the Secretary of Transportation trying to make this about social issues. To me, a road's a road. But not according to the left, man. Roads are racist. He didn't say that part. I added that in. But DeSantis also called it further evidence of wokeification of American politics and culture. Absolutely. Which is why, again, what the Daily Wire is doing is important. And if everybody here could subscribe to them, go over and support them. They got subscriptions as little as, I think $8. You pay that much for Netflix that's pushing out this trans stuff or Disney Plus. Might as well support something that's actually going to help America rather than hurt it. Senator Ted Cruz expressed similar statements. The roads are racist. We must get rid of roads, he tweeted last November. They're not going to get the roads. I mean, it's crazy because some roads are literally being painted white. So I'm curious to see what the left are going to say about all that. Well, it's not just the roads are racist and railways and bridges, milk cartons, all these things, right? The Guardian is coming out and saying the ruling is not, the Roe ruling to be specific, is not about states' rights. It's about power and control. So I'm not going to go through this whole op-ed, but basically what they're saying here is that Roe v. Wade is just another mechanism of power by government, by the Supreme Court, that must be racist within themselves because they're going to hold black people back by not allowing them to get abortions because of they had a baby, they can't support it. And that's not me. That's literally what they say. I mean, if you look at the numbers for abortion, the vast majority of abortions aren't from race and incest and all those stuff. It's the vast majority is just from they didn't have enough money. It's inconvenient to them. And I use that word inconvenient very, very usefully because they don't want to call it an inconvenience because when you use that language, it just kind of sounds bad that they're killing a human being over because of an inconvenience that they did. So it says here, and I want to find the part because it is crazy the language that they add in this of what they say. Here it is right here. So I'll read a couple paragraphs of this and it kind of brings it all together of the mindset of the left here. Yet the anti-abortion wings of the Supreme Court, Congress, and state legislatures are not scrambling to ensure just conditions for pregnancy and childbirth, nor child rearing. I would like to point out that the pro-abortionists are literally attacking, spray painting, and destroying pregnancy institutions. Like institutions that will give you like formula, they'll give you diapers, they'll help you with mental issues, with pregnancy, all those things. They're there to support people that wanted to choose to have a child. These people that are pro-choice, but they're going to say here that they're not scrambling to ensure just conditions for pregnancies. All the while, the same person that's saying this pro-abortionist, is attacking, or at least their group is attacking, these places that are helping people to give birth, have a pregnancy. It's crazy. This group espouses views and supports policies that ban racial justice education. I don't even know what that means. Prohibits trans kids from sports teams and bathrooms. They're not prohibiting from sports teams and bathrooms. If you're a biological male, you can still play sports. You can still use the men's bathroom. Now, if you're a male that thinks you're a female, no, you're not going into the female's bathroom and you're not playing on a female sport. You'll dominate them. And there's already been events of a male thinking they're female going into the women's bathroom and raping women. Go figure. Who would have ever thought something like that would have happened? It goes on to say refuses dollars for healthcare and unemployment and expands police power because police are bad again. It's so funny. AOC the other day, the same person that shouts defund the police, went to a protest surrounded by police and security with guns and stuff. But, you don't want to expand police power. That's all bad. The same people that are shouting problems with security at the Capitol when Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer had the responsibility and also had been asked to increase security at the Capitol before the January 6th events ever happened. They declined it, but now they want more security. They want more guns. They want more protection at the Capitol. So something like that never happens again. But they also want to defund the police. And if you talk about expanding the police and its power, you're racist. But the Democrats aren't racist when they want to do it for their own gain, for their own individual purposes. These are all efforts to restrict bodily autonomy, to create hostile living conditions to pre-service racial, gender, sexual, and economic hierarchies. See, it's all about keeping the people down. It's all about, there's no self-responsibility of if you think this is going to hurt you, meaning it could be an inconvenience, you having a child might actually impact your bottom line of you saving money, you getting out of poverty, you making the decisions of finding a different job, like going to college or finding a trade school. And because you had a child, it might impact you of finding a job or going to college or to a trade school to acquire skills that would get you an increase in income that would allow you to get out of poverty. But you decided to have sex, thus a child was born. And because you made that decision that impacts other decisions, everybody else is racist because of your problems. That's how this works. Dobbs is about more states' rights and protecting life. It's about power and control. I completely so there's the power and control aspect that I was talking about earlier, right? It's about power and control. So when things don't go their way and it's given back to the states so that your elected representatives can sit there and vote and institute certain regulations and laws because you fit it and that's what you want, so you voted it in, somehow there's power and control, and that's a negative aspect of this country. It's so baffling and head spinning that they can write these long columns and there's no self-awareness in what you're saying. I understand sometimes you go back and listen to something, you go, that's probably wrong, or I actually see where I was wrong on that one. But you're going to write an entire thing and almost everything in here is wrong. Almost every sentence is off. That is remarkable. It's remarkable. I mean, I literally watch every single one of my own episodes because I go back and I think, okay, that was kind of stupid. That think it was kind of wrong. I do a lot of this offhand. It's hard for me to work 2 or 3 jobs, prepare like you see Ben Shapiro do, the DailyWire, PragerU, all these places that do it full time. I can't do this full time. So a lot of this stuff just comes on prior knowledge, books I've read, maybe some articles and stuff like that. And, you're going to say things wrong because you're not preparing in the same way that maybe you should be. But this person does this for a living on this opinion for The Guardian. I mean, listen to this next thing, and you tell me if this sounds even correct. I completely understand the impulse to blame the Supreme Court's logic on Christianity or the societal hatred of women. Right-wing evangelism is a bullet train that transport homophobia, misogyny, racism, xenophobia, and more across the world. However, in addition to the social awareness of these interlocking forms of oppression, we must understand that decisions like Dobbs also led to material losses beyond individual privacy rights and bodily autonomy. Institutions and individuals beyond will benefit from our loss of agency. I mean, it's just unbelievable how he tried to fit as many words they can that they call Republicans. You're homophobic, misogynistic, racist, you're xenophobic. I mean, all those are listed here. And I love how I got to look at who actually wrote this for the he or she here. Let me look. But it's Dereka. I don't know if that's a male or female. Sorry. I don't know. But, and even if it was like Dan, then you come out and say, oh, Dan's a male because that's generally a male name. You're not even trying to be disrespectful. Then they'll come at you like, oh, I don't identify as a male. Well, biologically it might be Danielle, right? Then they transition to Dan. Who the hell knows anymore? But then they get upset with you, even though you're not trying to be disrespectful. You're just trying to figure out who the hell wrote it. Either way, they're throwing a bunch of stuff. So now Roe v. Wade's racist because some way, shape, or form you're holding people down rather than just making an individual decision that could benefit you. Or it might not benefit you. That's the risk that you take. Every day you go drive on the road. It's a risk you take. That's a risk of somebody else hitting you. In other words, somebody else getting you pregnant if you're a woman. Or you hitting somebody else, meaning you're a male getting somebody pregnant. I mean, there's so many analogies. I'm not saying they're perfect analogies. They could be very well rough analogies. But the idea still comes down to self and personal responsibility. And our society lacks that. And that's why a lot of people, I want to say one of the reasons, but there are 5 qualities that have been surveyed amongst the 10,000 millionaires that are within this country. It's the biggest study that's ever been done. It was done by Dave Ramsey's team. I believe you have the guy's named Chris Hogan writes the book, Everyday Millionaire, I think it's called. At least the study's called Everyday Millionaire. You should look it up. And it talks about the 5 qualities that these 10,000 millionaires have. And the first one is, I believe the first one is personal responsibility. And you just don't have that. You don't have personal responsibility in our society anymore. It's everybody else's fault. It's the other person's fault for getting you pregnant. It's not the consensual sex. It's not all those things. I'm not talking about race and incest. I'm talking about consensual, that you had sex with the other person. Thus, that's what happens when you have sex. Not all the time, but it's crazy. It's everybody else's fault. So the one thing I just want to point out here, and I'm going to kind of conclude with this. This is the Guardian website, folks. Now, this is when I say the left have lost their mind, they shout racism, they say a bunch of crazy crap that just doesn't make sense. I just want to read a few of the headlines of these opinion pieces. The first one was the Roe ruling is not about states' rights. It's about power and control, right? Automatically, when reading that, I knew it was going to go into racism, right? When you hear about power and control, that's 101, racism 101 for the left to try and construe and manipulate certain data and make it fit their narrative. Check out this next one right below it. To the migrants who died in Texas, Biden is no different than Trump on immigration. Without reading it, I guarantee you they're going to try and correlate people dying under the Trump administration to people dying under the Biden administration to eliminate the fact that Biden's plans, policies that he's put in place or their lack of have increased immigration, levels of illegal immigration that we haven't seen in decades. Because they want to massage the soldiers. They think Joe Biden's doing a fabulous job. And if the media can sit there and blunt the impact of what Joe Biden is doing by misconstruing certain narratives or misconstruing the data, twisting it, manipulating it, and feeding it to the American public, which is what Disney does, which is what The Guardian does, which is what MSNBC does, which is what CNN does. If they can do that, then they think that they can hold out for the midterms and actually swing a few seats, or at least keep a few seats. Does Justice Clarence Thomas want to overturn a landmark freedom of the press ruling? So now they're going to attack. I haven't read these. I guarantee they're going to attack Clarence Thomas because he's the Uncle Tom now, according to the Democrats and the left. They're even calling him a white person now, which is astonishing. The Supreme Court is letting prayer back in public schools. This is unsettling. Unbelievable. Tuesday's hearing, what a masterclass on the threats posed by Trump on our republic. Or to our republic, it says, rather. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Republicans have hijacked the U.S. Supreme Court. It's time to expand it. Black women could see a 33% increase in pregnancy-related deaths post-Roe. Why? I mean, does nobody else see kind of the bias here on everything's racist? If the Supreme Court doesn't go with what we say, they're racist, they're misogynistic, they're homophobe, xenophobic, they're against black people, they're against all, it's amazing. But then when something does go their way, yeah, they got all the shit together, they're fine, they get it. They totally understand. They're no longer racist, they're no longer misogynistic. It is baffling. So folks, there you have it. We ended today, Friday, hopefully on a good note of exposing the left and just the craziness that they have. If you enjoyed this content, if you enjoyed the Bald Brad Show, support us on YouTube by hitting that like and subscribe button and letting us know what you think about all of this. If you're over at Rumble, can you leave us a plus and a comment down below as well? And folks, we are streaming and as well as uploading this podcast on all major platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google. You can find us everywhere. So if you don't want to head over to YouTube and support YouTube because they are a leftist ran company, you can go over to other ones. I understand they're all kind of left leaning now, but find one that you like. Head over to Podbean. I'll leave a list. I'll leave my account down below, my actual webpage for Podbean. If you want to use that, you can go over there and listen to it and watch it. I believe I just have an MP3 of it. So you can also go to Rumble. You can support Rumble. That's more conservative. So we are everywhere, folks. We have expanded here at the Bald Brad Show to service and cater and try to get conservative thought out to everybody. That is our main goal here. So we love your support. We love your help. And with that being said, have a nice weekend. I will see you tomorrow for Supernatural Saturdays. And that is it for here at the Bald Brad Show.